Okay, let's dive into this future of architecture thing. We've got a ton of information here about the Venice Architecture Biennale, all thanks to Simona Cochi, a digital journalist who put it together for us. She's a producer over at the Italian Way, so it's good stuff. Big thanks to Simona and the Biennale press office for giving us all this.
Yeah, it looks like AI is front and center this year. But it's not just like robots building houses, it's more about rethinking what intelligence even means when we talk about design.
Interesting. So the exhibition is called Intelligence.Natural.Artificial.Collective. That sounds like it goes way beyond just algorithms.
Yeah, for sure. Carlo Ratti, the curator, he's making a pretty bold statement this year. He's saying we've hit a turning point. All those old ways of, trying to reduce the impact of climate change in architecture, like, they just aren't enough anymore.
So it's not enough to just build energy efficient buildings anymore.
Right, exactly. Ratty's saying we need to go beyond that, beyond just reducing our impact.
Yeah.
We need to design for a world that's already being reshaped by climate change. Think rising sea levels, crazy weather, and people having to move around. It's a whole new game.
Yeah, that's a little scary, but I can see how this Biennale could be hopeful too.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's all about finding solutions. And Ratty seems to think there's a lot of potential in combining natural and artificial intelligence. And he's also talking about collective intelligence.
But not just AI, but like learning from nature and even from different communities.
Exactly. Bringing together all these different types of knowledge, breaking down the walls between different fields.
That's really cool. And it looks like the Biennale itself is doing that too.
Oh, yeah. They've got over 750 people involved this year. Architects, engineers, artists, even philosophers.
Wow, so not just your typical architect stereotype.
Definitely not.
So what about the venues? I know it's being held in those classic spots like the Giardini and the Arsenal, but I also saw something about Forte Marghera.
Yeah, so the main pavilion is actually being renovated this year. So they're using the city of Venice as an exhibition space, too.
Wow, so people would just be walking around Venice and come across these exhibits.
Yep, exactly. You could be walking down the street and see like an exhibit on bioconcrete made from seaweed, or a system that uses canal water to make drinking water.
That's amazing. So the city itself becomes part of the experience.
Exactly.
Very cool. Okay, well let's get into the main venues now. What's happening at those?
So the Quartery, that's one of the main halls, right? Well, they've divided into three sections. It's like those worlds we talked about: natural intelligence, artificial intelligence, and collective intelligence.
Okay, so what does that actually look like? Like what would I see if I walked into one of these worlds?
So imagine you walk into the natural intelligence section. You might see structures built from bamboo or mycelium, that fungus stuff.
Yeah.
These materials are super strong, sustainable, and they can even absorb carbon from the air.
Wow, that's awesome. What about the artificial intelligence section?
Oh, that one's pretty wild. You might see robots building these really complex structures. Like, they're incredibly precise.
Like robots with hammers and stuff?
Well, maybe not hammers, but yeah. They're doing things that used to require, human hands.
Okay, so that's definitely a glimpse into the future.
For sure.
And what about the collective intelligence section?
Ah, that's where things get really interesting. One project is looking at how they build things in the slums of Lagos. They've developed all these really resourceful techniques, even though they don't have a lot of resources. It makes you question what we even consider good design?
Yeah, it's like they're saying intelligence can come from anywhere.
Exactly.
That's a really cool way to look at it. Okay, but let's talk more about AI specifically. I mean, it's clearly a big theme this year. So how is the Biennale actually showing what AI can do for architecture?
Well, there's a bunch of projects that are exploring that. Like, one team is using AI to analyze pieces of wood, the irregular pieces that would normally get thrown away. Well, they're using AI to figure out how to use those pieces as building material.
So that's making construction more sustainable.
Yep. And then there's this project called Construction Futures, a robot's dream. It's using these advanced robots, like humanoid robots, to explore the future of construction.
Okay, now I'm picturing robots on a construction site, like with welding torches.
Well, maybe not quite like that, but it's about how humans and robots can work together in the future. The robots can do the dangerous stuff, and the humans can focus on the more creative stuff.
So it goes back to that idea of collective intelligence.
Yeah.
Human and artificial intelligence working together. But it's not just about the actual building process, is it?
Right. There's another project, Venice Customized. They're using AI to tailor Venetian homes to the people who live in them.
Oh, so like your own personal AI architect.
Yeah, exactly.
Wouldn't that lead to everyone having the same kind of house, though?
That's a good point. But the project is all about giving people more control, you know? It's
That's
about
good.
personalization, not homogenization.
So it's like democratizing design.
Exactly.
Okay, that's really interesting. But let's zoom out a bit. How does all this connect to climate change?
Well, that's a big question. The Biennale is asking us to think about how AI can help us design cities that are more sustainable and resilient, like using AI to use resources better, reduce waste, and create buildings that can adapt to, changing weather and stuff.
So it's about using technology to work with nature, not against it.
Exactly. And it's about realizing that the future of architecture isn't just about architects. It's about bringing together all sorts of people to create a world that's, well, more intelligent.
That's a great point. Okay, this Biennale sounds packed with ideas, but before we get too deep into the weeds, let's take a quick break.
Yeah, it really is. And speaking of AI and climate change, there's this really cool project that's looking at water purification in Venice.
Oh yeah, I remember reading about that. They're using canal water to make espresso, right?
Yeah, it's a collaboration between Diller Scofidio plus Renfro, those architects, and some chef named Davide Oldani. They've designed this system that takes water straight from the canals and makes it clean enough to, well, make really good espresso. They say it's the best in Italy, but who knows?
Well, I guess it's a good way to get people thinking about the environment.
Right, exactly. It's like turning a problem into a solution.
Makes you wonder what else they could do.
Oh, yeah. There's a ton of projects using Venice as a testing ground. Like the Norman Foster Foundation and Porsche, they're working on sustainable transportation in the city.
So like solar-powered gondolas or something.
Maybe. It's more about finding new ways to get around a city like Venice, without all the noise and pollution.
Yeah, I'd love to see those noisy motorboats go away.
Right. And then there's this project called Margarissima. They're
Okay.
focusing on cleaning up the land around Forte Marghera. It's pretty polluted, but they're turning it into a park.
So they're taking this industrial wasteland and making it beautiful again.
Pretty much.
I like that. Okay, but let's get back to Ratty's idea of buildings as intelligent as trees.
Hmm.
It sounds cool, but what does it actually mean?
It's about thinking of buildings as like living things, you know? They need to be able to adapt and respond to their environment just like trees do.
Okay, I get the metaphor, but is that really possible?
Well, think about it. Trees use sunlight for energy, they regulate their own temperature, they even communicate with each other. What if buildings could do that too?
So we're talking about buildings that generate their own energy, adapt to the weather, and even talk to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Now that sounds like science fiction.
Uh-huh. Maybe a little bit. But some of the projects at the Biennale are already exploring those ideas. Like they're looking at bioreceptive concrete that lets plants grow on it.
So buildings covered in moss.
Yeah, pretty much. It helps regulate temperature and clean the air.
That's so cool. Are they doing anything else with that natural intelligence idea?
Oh yeah, tons of stuff. Adaptability is another big one. Trees can change their shape depending on the conditions, right? Well, architects are trying to do the same thing with buildings. They're experimenting with modular systems that let you like expand or shrink a building or even completely rearrange it.
That's amazing. It seems like designing with natural intelligence in mind requires a whole new way of thinking.
Totally. You have to be flexible, work with nature, and forget about buildings as these like permanent structures.
I see what you mean. You mentioned that project about the slums of Lagos earlier.
Mhm.
What makes that one so important?
It really shows that collective intelligence thing we were talking about. Those communities, they're incredibly resourceful. Even though they don't have much, they've come up with all sorts of innovative ways to build and organize themselves.
So it's about recognizing that good ideas can come from anywhere.
Exactly. And it challenges our assumptions about what good design even means.
Yeah, that's a really important point. So how does this collective intelligence idea play out at the Biennale itself?
Well, one of the main things they have is this speaker's corner. It's basically a space for people to have discussions and workshops. Architects, designers, even just regular people.
So it's a place to talk about the ideas from the exhibition.
Yeah. And it really shows that no one person has all the answers, We need to work together to solve these problems.
That's a good point. I like that they're encouraging that kind of dialogue.
Yeah, it's a big shift in how we think about architecture. It's not just about, the architect telling everyone what to do anymore. It's about collaboration and listening to everyone's ideas.
That makes sense. Okay, so what other projects are really pushing this collective intelligence idea?
There's this one called The Other Side of the Hill. It's looking at how population changes will affect our cities and like how we use resources.
So they're thinking long term.
Yep. They're asking questions like, what happens when the population starts to shrink? How do we adapt our cities to that?
That's a good question. Especially with climate change and all that.
Yeah. Exactly. And what's really interesting is that they're using ideas from biology to help answer those questions.
Biology. What do they have to do with architecture?
Well, they're looking at how microbial communities work, those tiny little
Oh,
organisms.
okay.
They play a big role in balancing ecosystems. So
Hmm.
the idea is to learn from them and design our cities to be more like ecosystems, with closed loop systems and all that.
That's a really cool idea.
Right. It's like learning from nature's smallest architects.
I like that.
And it shows that we can't just design buildings in isolation. We have to think about the whole system.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so are there any other projects you're excited about?
Oh, yeah, there are so many, but one that really stood out to me is called Matters Make Sense. It's all about the future of building
Oh, that's
materials.
interesting.
They're showing all sorts of crazy stuff: bioconcrete, banana fiber, even graphene. It's like they're saying, hey, we can build things out of
So
anything.
they're looking beyond the traditional materials.
Exactly. And it goes back to that natural intelligence thing again. Working with nature instead of fighting against it.
This whole Biennale is really making me think differently about architecture.
Me too. It's not just about, making pretty buildings anymore. It's about using design to solve real problems.
Yeah, and realizing that we need everyone's help to do that.
Absolutely.
There's one more project I wanted to ask you about. It's called Anti-Ruin by OZRUH. What's that one all about?
That one's really interesting. It's about, like, the beauty of decay, how buildings eventually crumble and become part of nature again.
So they're designing buildings that are meant to fall apart.
Well, not exactly. It's more about designing for the whole life cycle of a building,
Right.
from when it's built to when it eventually returns to the earth.
That's a really different way of looking at things.
It is. It makes you think, what if we design buildings that could be easily taken apart and reused?
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Right. It would change everything about how we build and deal with waste.
It sounds like this Biennale is at the forefront of a major shift in architecture.
I think so. We're moving towards a way of building that's more sustainable, more connected to nature, and more responsive to people's needs.
It's really exciting.
It is. And this Biennale is a great showcase for all of that. It's full of ideas that could change the world.
I completely agree. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, it
I
has.
think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
I hope so. This Biennale is going to be a game changer.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with a final question.
Okay, what is it?
What if every building was as smart as a tree, as adaptable as a chameleon, as tough as bamboo, and as connected as a network of mushrooms?
Wow, that's a great image. It really sums up everything we've been talking about.
Right. It's like the ultimate vision for intelligent design.
It is. And it shows that we can create a future where buildings are in harmony with nature.
You got it.
And it's a future that we can all be a part of creating.
That's a great message to end on. This Biennale is a call to action.
Yeah,
It's up to all of us to design a better future.
absolutely. Yeah, it really is inspiring. Like imagining our cities with buildings that are almost like living organisms, working with nature, not against it.
And that's a big part of this Biennale, right?
Hmm.
Rethinking what architecture can even be.
Absolutely. And there's this one project, Biogenesis. It's a team of architects and bioengineers, I think. And they're actually looking at growing buildings.
Growing buildings.
Yeah, like literally cultivating them from fungi and bacteria.
Wait, so you're telling me they're making buildings out of mushrooms?
Well, kind of, yeah. It sounds
Huh.
crazy, but these biomaterials are actually really strong. And they're super lightweight and sustainable. They even absorb carbon dioxide as they grow.
Wow, so they could actually help fight climate change.
Exactly.
But can you actually build a whole building out of mushrooms?
That's what they're trying to figure out. They're testing different techniques, like combining the biomaterials with, more traditional stuff. So you'd have these hybrid structures that are both strong and sustainable.
So it's like the best of both worlds.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
makes you think differently about like what we even use to build things.
For sure. It's not just about concrete and steel anymore.
Okay, so this Biennale is showcasing some pretty radical ideas.
It is.
And I bet it's inspiring a lot of young architects to think outside the box.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, there's this other project, Sky Gardens of Babylon. It's basically like a modern version of the Hanging Gardens. They're using vertical farming to create these these green spaces right in the middle of the city.
So it's like bringing nature back into our cities.
Exactly. Imagine living in an apartment building with a farm built right into it.
That would be amazing. Fresh food right outside your door.
Right. And it's not just about the food, it's about making cities healthier and more pleasant to live in.
So this Biennale is about a lot more than just pretty buildings.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's about rethinking our relationship with nature and how we can design cities that are good for both people and the planet.
I love that.
Me too. This Biennale is really making me hopeful about the future.
Me too. It's been a fascinating conversation.
It has.
Thank you for sharing all your insights with us.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has inspired you to think about the future of architecture and to remember that we all have a role to play in creating a better world.
Absolutely.
So let's get out there and design a future worth building together.